Welcome back to Cozy Club Stories, where you can unwind and drift off gently to relaxing tales from the past. Tonight, we will be reading another dark fantasy-inspired story, The Knight and the Last Dragon. So snuggle up and get ready to lose yourself in this whimsical adventure. The wind was cold in the high reaches of Drenlock, curling like smoke through the pine trees and whispering down from the snow-capped spires above. Beneath the ancient stone arch of the ruined Temple of Light, Sir Kalin knelt alone. His armour was worn, a patchwork of burnished steel and old leather, but the lion crest on his shoulder plate still shone faintly in the twilight. Before him, on a simple stone altar, sat a single candle burning low. Behind it, the great Book of Vows, its pages weathered by time, blood, and ash. Kalin's breath fogged in the chill air. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, not drawn, not raised, simply present, ready. "I swear," he murmured, voice steady, "by the old flame and the forgotten gods, I will seek the worm of Ashgard. I will ride through vale and ruin, and I will bring back the flame or die beneath its wings." The candle flickered. The vow was taken. And somewhere far off, beyond crag and cloud, something ancient stirred in its sleep. The village of Dunmere sat in the shadow of the mountains, its fields brittle with frost and its thatched roofs dark with soot. Long ago, it had been a place of music and market days, of dancing round the maypole and winter feasts beside roaring fires. Now, only silence lingered. They said the dragon had flown over Dunmere a year past, black wings blotting the sun, fire trailing like a comet's tail. It did not land, it did not speak, but after that day, the crops failed. The wells grew cold, and the villagers no longer dreamed. Kalin passed through quietly, nodding to those few who remained. At the broken fountain in the square, an old woman watched him from beneath a frayed hood. "You ride for the worm," she said, not a question. "You'll not return the same." Kalin dismounted, offering her a silver coin and a piece of dried apple. "None of us return the same," he said gently. "But some of us must still return." The old woman smiled. "Then may your shadow burn bright enough to hold back the dark." He left as the clouds thickened overhead, the scent of fire on the wind. The road beyond Dunmere wound into the trees, where the branches grew so tightly overhead they tangled like knotted fingers. This was the Black Forest, where even sunlight stepped lightly. Kalin's horse, Bramble, moved with caution. The trail was narrow, lined with mossy stones and old carvings half swallowed by ivy. Eyes, strange and silent, blinked from the underbrush. Foxes, owls, and other things less easily named. Vesper leaves stirred, though no wind blew. Kalin paused at a clearing where a once paved circle of stone lay cracked and covered in mushrooms. A shrine stood in the centre, a statue of a faceless knight holding a torch instead of a sword. Its flame had long since gone out. He dismounted and approached. Drawing a sliver of wax from his satchel, he lit a tiny flame from his flint and pressed it to the torch. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the torch caught and the forest sighed. Somewhere far within the trees, a branch snapped like a bone breaking. "That was not wise," said a voice behind him. Kaelin turned slowly. A figure leaned against a birch tree. A man, or perhaps a memory of one, wrapped in green-grey robes, a mask of bark over his face. The worm watches all. Kaelin's path led to the edge of a gorge where the earth split like a wound in the land. A single bridge crossed the chasm, an ancient arch of stone and bone, bound together with rusted chains. Crows lined the parapets like sentinels, silent as the grave. Bramble snorted uneasily. "It's just stone," Kaelin murmured, though he wasn't sure he believed it. The bridge had an unnatural stillness, as if it remembered too much. Halfway across, the air changed. The crows began to call. Not a cawing, but a long, low cry that sounded more like weeping. Then came the whisper. "Turn back, little knight. There is no glory here, only ash." Kaelin gritted his teeth and pressed forward. The flame in the lantern on his saddle burned blue now, flickering wildly. Each step echoed, the wind slicing through the gorge like the whisper of a blade. On the far side, a figure stood waiting. A woman, clad in tattered armour, her eyes dark and hollow. "Do you know my name?" she asked, voice like falling snow. "No," Kaelin said. "I was the last to try," she said. "The dragon sleeps beneath the mountain, but it dreams. And in its dreams, it devours." Kaelin nodded once. "Then I'll wake it before it dreams of anyone else." The woman didn't stop him. She stepped aside, vanishing into the mist. Behind him, the bridge crumbled. There would be no return the way he came. Beyond the gorge, the woods gave way to a hollow where no sun reached. There, nestled in a ring of stones, lay a village long abandoned. Houses leaning like weary men, windows gaping open to the wind. At the centre stood a vast ash tree, its roots curling through cobbled paths, its bark scorched and blackened. Kaelin dismounted. Bramble would not go further. The lantern flickered as he approached the tree. Scattered offerings remained at its base, dried flowers, carved feathers, scraps of old armour. And behind the tree, half hidden in tangled branches, a door stood carved into the trunk. He knocked once. The bark opened with a groan, revealing a stairwell spiralling down into the roots. Vesper light from the lantern guided his steps as he descended. Below, a room waited, round and warm, carved entirely from wood. Shelves lined the walls, filled with scrolls, feathers, bones, and hundreds of tiny glass vials, each glowing faintly. An old woman sat in the centre, spinning thread from shadow. "You've come for the dragon," she said without looking up. Kaelin nodded. "Many come," she continued. "Few return. But you carry something they did not." She pointed to the lantern. The worm fears flame, but not just any flame. Yours must remember. Feed it your memories, your fears, your name. Kaelin frowned. And what if I lose myself? Then the dragon wins before you ever reach it. He bowed his head. Then teach me. And beneath the ash tree, she began. For 3 nights beneath the ash tree, Kaelin learned. The woman who called herself Mirren spoke in quiet tones as she showed him how to coax truth into fire. Flame remembers, she whispered, if it is fed the right kind of memory. She took a single hair from his head and dropped it into the lantern. The fire flared gold, then softened, revealing a moment from his childhood, his brother laughing in the snow, long before the sickness came. It draws strength from what made you, she explained. Next, she asked for a fear. Kaelin hesitated, but at last, he offered a torn piece of his old war banner, stained and frayed, the sigil half burned. When it touched the flame, the light dimmed to a deep red. A memory surfaced. Fire on the battlefield. His captain screaming. Kaelin frozen beneath a sky of arrows. He nearly turned away, but the flame absorbed it, and when it steadied, it burned brighter than before. On the final morning, Mirren pressed a finger to his chest. Now give it your name. He spoke it aloud, his full name, unshortened and unhidden. The flame flickered violet, then white, then returned to its steady amber glow. You carry more than a sword, she said softly. You carry your story. That's what the dragon fears. When he stepped from the ash tree's hollow, the forest was silent. The path ahead twisted up into the hills where the mountain waited. Bramble neighed once. Ready. The hunt had truly begun. As Kaelin ascended the foothills, the trees thinned and the air grew colder. The wind smelled of iron and frost, carrying with it the low, distant groan of shifting stone. The mountain breathing, perhaps. By dusk, he spotted the silhouette of a crumbling watchtower atop a ridge. He guided Bramble toward it, hoping for shelter before nightfall. The tower, long abandoned, leaned to one side like a drunkard frozen in stone. Ivy curled around its base, and the banners that once hung proudly from its parapets had long since been reduced to threads. Inside, the walls were scorched. Blackened bones lay in corners, curled like sleeping dogs. A battle had happened here, long ago, but not forgotten. Kaelin found a rusted helm resting beside a splintered shield, and as he set up camp near the hearth, he whispered a brief prayer for whoever had stood guard in this place. The lantern's flame pulsed softly, offering warmth and memory. He dreamed that night of fire. Not the dragon's fire. No, this was the blaze of home. A stone hearth, his mother humming, the scent of spiced bread in the air. He saw his father lift him onto his shoulders, laughing beneath golden lamplight. But then the laughter turned to screams. The hearth cracked, the roof splintered, and in the distance, wings blotted out the stars. He woke before dawn, drenched in sweat. the flame in the lantern flaring wildly. The dragon was close. The higher Kaelin climbed, the more the world fell silent. Trees became stunted, their branches clawing like fingers at the grey sky. Snow began to fall, not gently, but in sharp, needling flakes that stung his skin and whispered along the stone path in flurries. Bramble's breath misted thick in the chill. The horse moved slower now, careful on the icy trail. Kaelin watched the sky with unease. He could feel it, a presence just beyond the horizon. Not eyes exactly, but something older and colder than watching. Remembering. Midday brought a grim discovery. On the edge of a narrow ravine, half buried in snow, lay a broken spear. The shaft was charred. Beside it, furrows were gouged deep into the earth, as though something massive had landed, then dragged itself forward. Blackened stones, melted ice, ash that refused to drift in the wind. He crouched and pressed his hand to the scorch marks. They were warm. Recent, he muttered. Vesper, silent until now, let out a soft growl from the folds of his cloak. The dragon had been here, maybe hours ago. That night, he didn't dare light a fire. Instead, he nestled into a cleft in the rock. Wrapped in his cloak, the lantern clutched tight. Its flame had grown quieter, as though hiding, as though it too feared what lay ahead. But Kaelin did not turn back. He closed his eyes and whispered the names of his family like a spell, and the mountain listened. By dawn, the wind had changed. It no longer howled, it whispered. Kaelin followed the trail deeper into a narrow gorge, where the stone walls rose like cathedral spires. The path twisted tightly, hemmed in by jagged rock, and the snow had ceased entirely, replaced by a fine mist that clung to the cliffs like spider silk. The air was strange here, warmer but not welcoming. As he walked, voices drifted on the breeze. Some called his name, others wept or laughed in broken, brittle tones. Kaelin kept his eyes forward and his hand on the hilt of his sword. The pass remembers, Vesper murmured from his place inside the cloak. This is where the last hunt failed. Kaelin nodded grimly. He had heard the story as a boy, how 5 knights rode into the Whispering Pass to slay the beast, and none returned. Their bones were said to have been scorched to ash. No remains had ever been found. But now he found a sign. A rusted sword stuck from a crevice in the rock, its hilt blackened, the blade still faintly glowing with residual heat. As he passed, Kaelin touched it gently. The warmth pulsed up his fingers, and for a moment he felt a flicker of memory that was not his own. The heat of dragonfire, the scream of steel, the final thoughts of a man who knew he would not survive. The lantern's light steadied. Not much farther, Kaelin whispered. They climbed higher. Above them, the clouds parted, just for a breath, and in that breath, Kaelin saw it. A shadow against the sky. Wings like torn sails. A serpentine form coiled around the highest peak. The dragon, waiting. The ascent to the summit was slow, each step harder than the last. Here, the rocks bled warmth, and the very snow hissed as it touched the ground. The mountain exhaled sulphur and smoke, a deep, steady breath that pulsed through the stone. Kaelin's armour steamed, the cold long behind him, replaced by a stifling heat that clung to his skin. At the edge of the peak, the path widened into a blackened plateau, scorched flat, as if a great hand had pressed it into shape. Charred bones lay scattered across the stone, fused to the earth. Some were human, others not. Kaelin stepped forward, and the lantern flame flickered violently. The dragon waited. It rose from behind a curtain of steam, vast, sinewed, and ancient. Scales the colour of rusted iron, wings frayed at the edges. Its eyes were older than kingdoms, glowing with an inner fire that never dimmed. Smoke curled from its nostrils as it watched him. Kaelin did not draw his sword. Instead, he spoke. I am Kaelin of Greythorn, son of a burnt land. I come not for glory, but to end a debt left unpaid. The dragon's head tilted. Do you speak? Kaelin asked quietly. The beast moved. Its claws dug into the stone, and with a sound like breaking thunder, it stepped forward. Its voice came not with words, but into his mind, deep, weary and cold as dying embers. Another night, another end. Kaelin's hand trembled, but he did not run. The wind howled over the peak, but the world had narrowed to two, night and dragon. Kaelin took another step forward, feeling the ground radiate heat beneath his boots. His hand hovered near his sword, though it stayed sheathed. His breath came slow and steady. I don't want to kill you, he said, voice low. But the fires are spreading. The valley burns. Villages vanish beneath ash. The dragon's pupils narrowed. A long exhale fumed from its nostrils. And why should I care for the children of men? It asked. Again not aloud, but deep within his skull. The voice was older than any tongue, full of iron, smoke, and time. Did they care when they hunted my kin into nothingness? When they broke our wings for sport and buried our eggs in stone? Kaelin's jaw tensed. They feared what they didn't understand, he said. They feared power they could not control, the dragon corrected. And so they destroyed it. Kaelin felt a bitter ache in his chest. Then why burn now? Why return? The dragon's wings shifted, folding tight against its sides. It stared down at the night, not with fury, but with sorrow. Because I am the last, it said, and soon I will be nothing. The fire must have one final sky to consume. Kaelin's lantern guttered in the heat. And for a moment, the flame nearly died. But he raised it, and it steadied. You don't have to end this in fire, he said quietly. The dragon did not reply. Not yet. The silence stretched between them, like a chasm. The dragon's great golden eyes, ringed with age and memory, locked with Kaylin's. There was a sadness in them, yes, but also the weariness of countless winters, of centuries spent hiding from blades and torches. "You came to slay me," it finally said aloud, its voice reverberating like distant thunder through the bones of the mountain. "I came to stop the burning," Kaylin replied. The dragon regarded him, unblinking. "And if that means my death?" Kaylin unslung his sword from his back, not to raise it, but to lay it down. It rang softly against the stone. "I was raised on stories of dragon killers," he said, "taught that glory lived in your death. But those stories never spoke of your grief or your loneliness." He stepped forward, close enough now that the dragon could end him in a heartbeat. But it didn't. The air around them was heavy with ash and ancient sorrow. "I don't know if we can fix the world," Kaylin continued, "but I'd rather try than keep repeating the same old ruin." For the first time, the dragon closed its eyes, and the mountain was quiet. The chamber shifted subtly, as though the mountain itself had exhaled. The dragon opened its eyes again, and a soft, almost imperceptible glow pulsed along the lines of its scales. Not flame, but something gentler, warmer. "You are unlike the others," it murmured. Kaylin let out a slow breath. "I've seen enough fire. I want something different." The dragon moved, rising to its full height, its wings brushing the stone walls without unfolding. It loomed impossibly vast, but no longer threatening. "Long ago," it said, "there was an accord between dragonkind and the kingdoms of man. We gave knowledge, protection. In return, you lit the mountain lanterns and kept to the old ways. That covenant was broken. Flame met steel, and the wars began." Kaylin nodded. "Then let us restore it." A long silence passed. Then, from behind a veil of crystal growths in the wall, the dragon retrieved something. An ember stone the size of a heart. "If you carry this to the Veil of Lanterns," the dragon said, "and place it in the cradle flame, the light will return to the mountain passes. The lands will begin to heal." Kaylin took it reverently. It was warm in his hands, humming with promise. "Then I'll go." The dragon lowered its head in a slow nod. "And I shall guard the mountain, not as a monster, but as a keeper once more." The path from the dragon's lair was not the one Kaylin had taken in. It was older, deeper, carved through the heart of the mountain like a forgotten artery. Moss clung to the walls in silver-green threads, and ancient lanterns hung from hooks of bone and crystal, long extinguished. In his hand, the ember stone pulsed softly. Each time its light flared, a nearby lantern would flicker to life, bathing the narrow passage in golden warmth. Shadows scurried away, and the air lost some of its bite. Vesper padded silently at Kaylin's side, as if the cat had always been there, though Kaylin didn't recall its arrival. "You've chosen a harder path," the cat said, breaking the long silence. "I didn't think cats cared for such things." Vesper flicked its tail. I care when flame returns to forgotten places. This mountain remembers, and it's been asleep too long. The tunnel finally opened into a wide cavern, roofed with hanging glass formations like frozen fire. In the center, a stone dais stood, surrounded by empty lantern stands, hundreds of them. Kaelin stepped forward, the ember stone warm and bright in his hands. This is the cradle flame, Vesper whispered. He knelt, placed the ember stone in the cradle. There was a deep sound, like a bell being rung underwater. And then, one by one, the lanterns ignited. The lanterns burned without smoke, their glow amber and ancient, casting flickering shadows that danced like ghosts across the cavern walls. Kaelin stood at the center, heart still, breath quiet. He had expected light. He had not expected memory. Each flame whispered something forgotten. A mother's lullaby, the vow of a long dead night, a dragon's name once spoken with reverence instead of fear. He felt the stories wrap around him, threads of warmth and sorrow, and for a moment he was a boy again by his hearth, listening to his grandfather spin tales of fire and glory. But this time, the dragon in the story didn't fall. Vesper watched from the edge of the dais, eyes reflecting flame. These lanterns are more than light, the cat said. They remember. Kaelin's brow furrowed. Then why were they extinguished? The world forgot, Vesper said simply. And when memory dies, so do the things it holds. The knight turned back to the dais. His hands, once calloused for war, now trembled with something gentler. Hope. And above them, the dragon shifted in its slumber. The first peaceful breath it had taken in centuries. That night, Kaelin did not sleep. He sat beside the dragon's resting form, staring into the heart of a lantern's flame, while the shadows danced like old friends around him. Vesper curled at his side, snoring softly. The silence of the mountain wasn't hollow. It was sacred, like the hush of a cathedral long abandoned and finally remembered. Just before dawn, the dragon stirred. Its golden eyes opened slowly, studying him, not as prey or threat, but as kin. You chose not to strike, it said, voice lower now, softer. Few would have done the same. I didn't come here for blood, Kaelin replied. I came for peace, if such a thing can be found. The dragon lowered its great head until it was level with his. Then we make a pact, you and I, it rumbled. Your sword for my flame, your vow for my truth. The fire that once destroyed may yet be used to heal. Kaelin didn't speak. Instead, he reached forward and pressed his palm to the dragon's brow. The scales were warm, pulsing faintly, like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. The pact was made, a knight's purpose rewritten, and far above them, on the surface of the waking world, the skies began to shift, not with smoke, but with the first golden streaks of sunrise. Thanks. The climb from Hollowdeep was quieter than the descent had been. Kaelin led the way through narrow veins of stone and forgotten runes, the dragon trailing behind in silence. No longer a beast of shadow, it moved with reverence, shrinking its shape with ancient magic until it could pass through narrow tunnels and steep ledges. Vesper, of course, complained the entire time. I liked it better when things were trying to eat us, the cat grumbled. At least then it was clear who the enemy was. Kaelin smiled faintly. Maybe the enemy was the stories we believed. Above, the sky split open into daylight. They emerged in the glade where Kaelin's journey had begun. A circle of standing stones beneath the arms of bare, frost-covered trees. Snow had fallen in their absence, covering their tracks. The dragon stepped into the sun and breathed deeply. Smoke curled from its nostrils, but it did not burn. Instead, the fire settled inside it, like a lantern relit after long darkness. Kaelin stood beside it. A knight, yes, but no longer a hunter. What now? He asked softly. The dragon looked east, toward the kingdoms that had forgotten the old ways. Now we show them, it said, that peace can be forged, not just fought for. Together they walked from the glade, two silhouettes against the pale morning, into a world waiting to believe in something new. Word of Kaelin's return spread like fire across the frozen hills. By the time he and the dragon reached the outskirts of Elvergate, a crowd had gathered, half in awe, half in fear. No one had seen a dragon walk among men in an age, and no one knew whether to kneel or run. A horn sounded from the castle walls. Soldiers assembled. Arrows were nocked. Kaelin stepped forward alone, arms raised. This creature is not your enemy, he called. It is the last of its kind, and I ask safe passage for it. For me. For peace. There was silence. Then came the clip of hooves. A rider approached from the gates, cloaked in white, face veiled in frost silver. The envoy of the Pale King. He halted his steed beside Kaelin. You dare bring a worm to our gates and speak of peace, he hissed. I do, Kaelin said calmly, because I've seen what lies beneath the surface of our stories. I know now what the old war cost, and I know what will happen if we start it again. The envoy studied him. Then, to everyone's shock, he dismounted and drew a blade. Not to strike, but to kneel, the tip touching snow. I serve truth, the envoy said, not fear. The soldiers lowered their weapons, and the gates of Eldergate opened. Within the high, vaulted halls of Eldergate, Kaelin stood before the Council of 12. The ruling voices of the realm, cloaked in centuries of tradition, pride, and suspicion. Behind him, the dragon waited in the courtyard, watched by 100 uneasy guards. Snow fell lightly through the open arches, dusting Kaelin's shoulders as he faced the 12 robed figures seated in a half-circle of stone thrones. The High Speaker, a woman as pale as snowdrift and just as cold, narrowed her eyes. "You bring us a legend," she said, "one that murdered thousands. Why should we not slay it now and finish what our ancestors began?" Kaelin stood tall. "Because the truth has grown crooked in the telling. I have seen the memories of the beast. I have heard the dragon's grief. It is not evil. It is alone." A murmur swept the chamber. One of the younger councillors, Lord Elric of the Western Reach, leaned forward. "If what you say is true, then perhaps we owe the past more than swords. Perhaps it is time for something better." Others shifted uncomfortably. Not all were ready to release the ghosts of the past. The High Speaker gestured. "And what would you have us do, Knight of the Flame? Let it live among us? Feed it? Honor it?" Kaelin shook his head. "No, only let it go. Let it fly once more over the mountains. Let it carry the story of mercy. That will be enough." There was silence. Then the High Speaker spoke. "We will vote." The council chamber fell into a hush so deep, even the wind outside seemed to still. One by one, each councillor stood to cast their vote. Lord Elric was first, stepping forward with firm voice. "Let it go. Let peace begin." Others followed, some reluctant, others with trembling conviction. The tally rose in favour of mercy, until only the High Speaker remained. She stared at Kaelin with eyes honed like blades. Then, slowly, she stood. "History is not easily rewritten," she said, "but perhaps it should not be written only in blood." She raised her hand. "I." The chamber breathed again. Outside, in the frost-lit courtyard, Kaelin approached the dragon. Its head dipped low, eyes glimmering with something like gratitude. Quiet, restrained, ancient. "You are free," Kaelin whispered, placing a hand against the worn scales of its brow. "Fly, and let the world remember your name, not as a monster, but as the last ember of something greater." The dragon stepped back, wings slowly spreading. Snow swirled up as it crouched, then launched into the sky, a blast of wind and flame lighting its ascent. It soared beyond the towers of Eldergate, its roar echoing through the valleys like a final song. And then it was gone, just a speck of red fire among clouds. Kaelin stood alone, sword sheathed, heart quiet. He had come to kill a beast. Instead, he had saved a story. The days that followed passed in a strange and gentle hush. Eldergate, once braced for fire and ruin, found itself instead wrapped in a long, peaceful winter. The bells rang not for mourning, but for relief. The blacksmiths returned to their forges, not to sharpen swords, but to craft tools once more. Children dared play near the frost-laced walls, where once they had hidden. And Kaelin, he remained, for a time. He stayed long enough to help repair the broken battlements. Long enough to light lanterns along the keep's walkways. Long enough to learn how to sleep without his sword within arm's reach. Each morning, he would walk to the highest point in Eldergate, and look to the northern sky, wondering where the dragon had flown. There were rumours, of course, villagers speaking of a red streak across the moonlight, of trees bowed beneath invisible wings, of lakes that steamed mysteriously warm even through the freeze. But Kalin said nothing. He simply smiled. Eventually, he left the castle behind, carrying only his worn cloak, a small satchel of food, and no sword. Not anymore. He wandered south into quieter lands, where his name meant little, and peace still had a chance to grow. Along the way, he told stories in exchange for a place to sleep. Tales of old dragons, dying kingdoms, and knights who chose kindness. He never spoke of the beast's true name, but in quiet taverns by low firelight, as eyelids grew heavy